Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me at the Private Property Farming Podcast. This is episode 24 on the 24th of December, Christmas Eve. So I really hope that you've been enjoying your holidays so far and you're taking a much needed break from such a hectic year that we've all had. But yeah, I think today's topic is quite interesting in the sense that we're talking about planning. So I think you could definitely take notes in what I have to say today. And maybe you could implement some of these notes or plans for next year. And so the topic for today is we're talking about planning to ensure that your farm becomes a success. And what are the things that you need to think about when you start planning for farming or for your farm or for your agribusiness? So when I say agribusiness, you could be in the secondary leg in the agricultural value chain, where you're buying raw inputs from farmers and you are processing that or adding some sort of value into that product or service to obviously service your client as well. And so, yeah, I think I'm just going to take it down quite slowly and go a bit in depth in each of the points that I'm going to mention, but it will definitely assist you in terms of planning for your farm to ensure that your farm or your agribusiness becomes a success. And so the first thing that I'm going to touch on is basically doing research. I think if you want to go into farming, or you want to expand your farming operation or diversify basically in your farming operation, you have to do some form of research. And for the startup farmers that are basically listening, the critical point or part in research is that, firstly, you're asking yourself questions in terms of what is it that I want to farm? Why do I want to farm the specific commodity? Does it tie into my plans? And for example, if you want to go into avocado production, you need to do research in terms of what are the peaks or what are the peaks in which avocado production goes, or what are the peaks are avocados in season, sorry for that, and what prices do avocados go for when they are in season. You consider the fact of when they're out of season, what are you going to substitute as a crop to ensure that your business stays afloat, to ensure that your business has cash flow? If you are in livestock production, you need to think of things like when your cattle goes into mating season, when it's birthing season, when it's grazing season, you need to ensure that you've put adequate plans in place to ensure that at every stage or step in your production cycle, your operations needs are met. Similarly as well, if you're in poultry farming, you need to plan in terms of what is the size of the chicken houses that needs to be, how are you going to get ventilation, lighting in the chicken houses, how many chickens can that specific chicken house accommodate as well, what are the cycles, where you're going to get your day-old chickens. So whatever commodity you decide to venture into, you need to do some form of research, understand the different cycles, the peaks, the low season, what is it that you're going to plant or grow when you are in birthing season or mating season or off season in your crop production plan. So I think research is firstly a key part or key component when you're deciding or to venture into farming. The other part is that when you decide to buy a farm as well, I think I've spoken on this before, you need to think about the location of the farm. How far is it from markets? What infrastructure does this farm have? Does it tie into what I want to grow? Is the farm big enough for my livestock that I want to accommodate? Does the farm have adequate or sufficient security? Livestock theft is at an all-time high, especially with sheep farming. And so do I have the right tracking devices for my animals? What sort of risks do I need to mitigate based on what the farm can accommodate in terms of my livestock? And so these are all the elements that you need to think of when you want to consider going into farming or making a critical decision on whether to buy this farm or not. Does this farm have a borehole? Does it have water? Does it have good soils as well? And then also, even in your borehole, can your operation simply survive with one borehole? Or do you need to drill another borehole? What is the liters per hour that this borehole can deliver? And so these are all the steps as well that you need to think of when you're buying a farm. And this all forms part of your planning as well. The other aspect that you need to think of is staff, your human resources. Are you going to get, from a crop production perspective, what type of employees are you going to get? Is it going to be general field workers? Are they going to do everything from planting to harvesting? Or are you going to have a specific team that is meant for planting, a specific team for weeding, a specific team for spraying, a specific team for harvesting? What rate per hour or per day do you give this employee? How do you measure their tasks, their key performance areas? And benchmark against with other farmers and their workers, just based on industry standards. How much are you going to pay them as well? How often are they going to be working? Is it only on peak seasons when you're harvesting? And how many individuals are you also going to be employing during the winter months, where business tends to be very slow during those times? And I think it's also important to really plan with your staff in mind. Should a crisis happen, is there additional training that you have to give to your staff? For example, how to handle fires, how to handle any emergencies that could happen on the farm, because your staff is an extension of you. And for those that are really running their farms by themselves, what I mean by that, if you're a sole owner and then you just have a team, you don't have farm managers or supervisors, your farm employees or your farm workers really need to be an extension of yourself. They need to understand how the business operates in the different season, in the different times of the day, etc., so that when you're not there, they are able to rectify any crises that could happen on the farm, handle any emergencies that could happen on the farm. And so you need to also plan for your staff in terms of how do you equip them in terms of skills. When a new technology comes into the farm, how can they use that to ensure that they work more efficiently or work better or faster, or whatever the case is. So when you're planning for your staff, you really need to ensure that you have an adequate team that is experienced or that has some sort of knowledge to carry out their tasks. And also, you need to remunerate them accordingly. What drives them? Is it just a basic salary, or is it a salary per task or per performance? Should you give them bonuses as well? Should there be leave days, off days, things like that, when they've achieved their tasks? And what motivates them? So from a reward system as well, what motivates them? I know some farmer friends of mine reward their employees by giving them, coupons or discounts in their favorite retailer where they shop in. It's not really always about giving their employees cash or rewarding them with cash, but you really need to know your team very well to understand what really motivates them on the farm. And also, I think just in terms of gender, I've always said this before, that I've personally struggled back in 2016, 2017 with retaining female employees on the farm, simply because it was such a nightmare having to manage them accordingly, because a lot of the females that I employed on my farm were single mothers, and they would have 1 or 2 or 3 children. And at any given point in time in the month, they would have to maybe take their child to the clinic, or they would obviously have their own appointment with their nurse or doctor, whatever the case might be, for their own personal reasons. And the reason why I say I sometimes struggled to retain female employees is because, for example, I would employ, let's say, 15 women, and in a period of 30 days in that month, I would have to ensure that my roster is quite tight. So I would know when each of them would be at the farm, and I would know when their appointment at the clinic will be, so that I could plan around that. And so, for example, if a Sbongile was absent on every day of the month on the 15th, I'd need to ensure that how do I replace Usbongile for that day to ensure that my operations continue as normal. And so sometimes it becomes a nightmare because, again, we all know the infrastructural challenges that our country faces. And sometimes I would get feedback from my female employees saying, yes, today my doctor's appointment was scheduled for the 15th, but I have to go back tomorrow because the queues at the clinic were too long. I couldn't be seen in time, so these are the things that I really have to manage as an employer, to know that, okay, he's not here for a day or two. And if it's a star performing employee on the farm, you really need to ensure that the morale of the team still stays the same. We can all still deliver the same outputs. And so these are the things that you have to plan with your staff. And in farming, you'll definitely find that there's so many things that could happen with regards to staff. And again, I was also impacted when there were strikes. Service delivery strikes in the informal settlements. I used to hire also in my old farm. It was quite close to an informal settlement, and that's where I would get quite a number of my employees. And when there were strikes due to service delivery, obviously they'll block the roads leading to and from the farm, but I would find that some of my employees would not come to work simply because the community would intimidate them to say that, the cause that we're striking for is very important. And so instead of you, joining us in the strike, you're going to work, and it's unfair because you're going to obviously benefit once our mayor or the municipality, gives us certain services. And so my employees would be intimidated, and they would have no choice but to really stay at home or form part of that strike when the community would obviously be striking for service delivery. And what that does to me at the farm, in the business, it's still a business at the end of the day. I still need employees. And so if you don't plan for your employees or for your labor, you could find yourself in a very difficult position where you can't harvest, where you can't service some of your clients, where you have to call them and say, sorry, Mr. So-and-so, today we cannot deliver any crops to you simply because we're affected by a strike. And sometimes not every single client understands this. And if you're lucky and if you've got a good relationship with your clients, they would. But at the end of the day, you are a business, your farm is a business, you still need to generate cash flow or revenue at the end of the day. And so this is what I mean by at every integral stage or part in your farming business, you need to really think of the risks that might happen. You need to plan for that specific stage, whether it's planting, harvesting, mating season, birthing season. You need to ensure that your farm has different camps for every stage in your business or in your farm to ensure the longevity and sustainability of the business. And so please do not discount the workforce or the labor, because they are an integral or key asset to your business succeeding. Another thing that you definitely need to plan for, especially in farming, because it's such a capital intensive industry or business, you need to ensure that your business constantly has capital or cash. It needs to be liquid. And so if you want to go into farming but don't have capital, think about the ways in which you could raise capital, whether it's from immediate family and friends, trying to raise capital in your personal capacity by getting a loan or an additional bond on a specific asset. Any ways in which you could raise money, I think definitely explore those options before approaching investors or banks to give your business money. Because once you do that, there's so many things that are going to be required from you. Cash flow forecast for the next 3 to 5 years. They'd want to know your balance sheet. They'd want to know your experience in farming. They would want to have audited financial statements. They would want to have offtake agreements and letters from potential suppliers or clients. They'd really want to know, how are you going to run this business and what are you going to use the money for? And you need to be held accountable for that. If you're having discussions with investors, they would also ask, how much equity are you willing to depart with in your business? And what is it from investors are you looking for apart from capital? Are you looking for business advice, business expertise? Are you looking for investors that could also, bring certain markets into your business, add a bit of expertise in terms of from an advisory board in your business? So these are the things that you need to think of when raising capital for your agribusiness or for your farm, whether you're starting out or just growing the business. And also, I think when you're servicing clients, some farmers like to diversify the clients that they supply. So they could supply to retail, they could supply to processors. Some of them are very happy also supplying to informal markets, because they know that the individual with the bakkie that is coming to take 2 tons of cabbage from my farm every day is key to my business because he pays in cash. And so, having a diversified client base is an advantage in ensuring that your business stays liquid. You'll have a client that will pay you cash every single day or every second day, no matter, depending on how frequent they come through to your farm to collect, to buy some of your product. And then from there on, you might have the formalized clients where they pay you within 14 days or 30 days. So you need to ensure that there's a balance and that there's enough reserves in your business. Because sometimes at the farm you might encounter a situation where fertilizer is finished, or certain chemicals are finished, or there's a breakdown in a tractor. You need to pay this mechanic or buy this type of tool that could, or parts that could really ensure that your tractor is working again. There's so many things that could go wrong. I mean, your infrastructure might be broken and you need to fix that. And so having capital is key for your business. And if you're a business that only just has clients, for example, that pay you after 30 days and you are literally living from month to month, the minute your client pays, you're able to only use those funds for about a week, and then you are praying in the weeks leading to month end, then I think you may just need to reconsider how you're managing your cash in the business, because I think, talking from experience, you really need money at any given point in time, or you really need to have access to cash at any given point in time at the farm, because anything could go wrong. And this is where we talk about the risks in farming. And so even though you might have a lot of the things in your operations planned to a T, you need to really budget for the unforeseen circumstances. And so capital is something that you really need to consider when you're either starting out in farming or just growing your agribusiness. And then I think from a logistics point of view, and this is something that I see some farmers tend to think of as an afterthought. Essentially, sometimes people are so excited to start farming and they plant a crop on the ground and only look for markets once that, they start harvesting. But then when the market just says, no, we're not going to come to your farm, how are you going to bring the produce through to us? Then some farmers only start to think about the logistics aspect of their business. And so you really also need to plan in terms of how you're going to get your product to market. How far is that? Should you be buying your own trucks? If you're having your own trucks internally, who's going to manage the logistics part of the business? What happens when there's a breakdown? If you're outsourcing your logistics as well, what is the company that you're going to be outsourcing? What are their rates? Are they comparative or competitive in the industry? What happens even when there's a breakdown? How quick are they to respond? For example, if this truck is stuck on the highway, for example, and it's important to think ahead and really act fast, because in farming you are definitely supplying perishable products. Let's say crops, to be vegetable or fruit. For example, these are perishable products, and clients always expect them to be delivered at a specific temperature. And so, when there's a breakdown in the truck and you're sending your produce to a client, how quick are you to react? How quick is the company that you're outsourcing the logistics to be able to, dispatch another truck so that they could take that produce, move into the other truck and send it through to the client? I know some farmers, especially some farms that I've seen, they have dedicated diesel mechanics or mechanics that are working at a workshop and always servicing their trucks. on a daily basis, or even to the extent of servicing the tractors, because tractors in farms not only are important for when you're starting to do your land preparation. Tractors in farms sometimes work as a mode of transportation, maybe to take workers from one area of the farm to the next area. It could be, you could be farming in large tracts of land, let's say 1,000 hectares. And so, a tractor is important to take maybe workers from block A to B, or whatever the case might be, or you might have multiple farms in one area. So a tractor may be useful to transporting workers from one farm to the next. Sometimes your pack house might not necessarily be in the farm in which you're producing in. It could be in the next block or a few kilometers away. And so tractors serve as part of logistic and not only in land preparation. And so what happens should there be a breakdown in the tractor, especially in the peak season, maybe when you're harvesting, or when you're doing your land preparations, you really need to ensure that as a farmer, not a long time goes by when you're in that peak production or in the peak phase of your business where your tractor is left dormant or unserviced, etc., because you need that as an integral part in your production. So these are the things that you need to plan for. And the safety of the tractor, do you have enough diesel or fuel on the farm, or reserves in terms of petrol, because sometimes you may find that you're working, you're forgetting to refill, and right now you need to harvest, but we don't have enough petrol or diesel. So these are the things that you need to plan on, thinking about logistics. And I think just encompass everything that I've said. This all forms part of your business plan. Essentially, when you're planning to start any business, or most importantly, I think specific to this podcast, start farming, you need to really have a business plan in place. And this is not only for external institutions, but this is for yourself as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as the CEO of your farm. You really need to have a business plan and considering all these aspects to the T. So the questions that you ask yourself, you need to be ensure that you can answer them. If you're stuck in terms of how do you solve this specific problem, definitely use the advice of someone more knowledgeable or experienced. It could be another farmer, it could be an agronomist, it could be a technical sales rep, whoever is part of your support team in your farm. Definitely use them to assist you in getting more information so that any problems that may occur in your farm, you definitely have a solution. And so when you're thinking about farming, planning is key. And as the saying goes, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And so the different aspects that you need to look at in your agribusiness is that you need to definitely consider capital, your workforce, which is your human resources, your marketing plan, the operational function of your business, the financial function of your business. Is this business ultimately going to thrive? You need to really do enough research on that specific commodity that you're going to be farming, livestock, crop, grain farming. You need to also understand the different seasons in which these commodities are in demand, and when they're not in demand, what are the different prices? How are the prices controlled? How do you mitigate any risks? For example, any pest infestation or fungi. If you're having livestock or in the poultry business as well, the vaccination. How do you treat that? The temperatures in which the temperature in the environment in which you're housing your animals. These are all things that you need to plan for and make sure that you've covered every single aspect of your farm business to the best of your knowledge, so that when a crisis happens, you are well prepared for it. And I know in the previous podcast, we spoke about technology. And I think to add on to this discussion is that definitely leverage of using technology in any stage of your agribusiness. There are free farming apps that could help you with record keeping. There are farming apps or just any a basic bookkeeping or accounting apps that could assist you as a farmer to record your transaction, to record your sales every day or on a weekly basis. And so this all forms part of planning. And from a financial point of view, those records of your sales could all obviously form part of your management accounts and essentially become your financial statements at the year end. And so leverage off technology, use automated fertigation systems if you definitely have the budget for it, because they could detect any problem that could occur before you knowing, and they can measure or control the EC or the pH of the water. They could detect any soil-borne diseases, or they can detect if the plant is in distress, and you could rectify any problems. So technology definitely helps in ensuring that you are managing any potential risks on the farm much better. And you could just definitely grow your agribusiness and just worry about other things instead of just the small things that you may not encounter or not be prepared for. So I think planning in farming is key, and this is the reason why they said, you know, agriculture is such a risky business, because anything can happen at any given point in time. And so as a farmer, you need to make sure that you are prepared. And this advice goes to whether you're a startup farmer, or whether you've just been farming for a couple of months, or whether you are an experienced farmer, because we all know, and trust me, farmers will tell you that even though, you know, they follow a certain formula in their farming production, not every season is the same, you know. So there are times when climate is, you know, can completely change. Maybe now you're used to expecting rains in November and December, but, you know, it could happen that in the next few years, you know, the rains are delayed and it starts to only rain in March and April. So what happens then? You know, and so this is the reason why planning is important, and just don't be complacent. Definitely be an active farmer. Take things in your control, and make sure that you are present and active in your agribusiness. And so, yeah, I think I've covered enough on this topic, but if you have any questions, please let me know, because at the end of the day, this is how we all succeed as farmers. And definitely also speak to other farmers, you know, understand how they do some of their, how they manage some of their operations, especially if they're farming something similar to what you're farming. And so this could also help you in the planning of your business. And I know sometimes I always tend to focus on primary production, but even if you're in the secondary part of the business or in agriculture, for example, for any one of you listening that maybe doesn't have a keen interest to farm, but you want to buy produce directly from farmers and supply to different markets, or you want to be an agro processor, for example, the same rule still applies. You need to plan, because I've definitely had people who are marketers who have contracts with, say, for example, mining companies, catering companies, hospitals, or certain government institutions like prisons, for example, where they have contracts to supply fruits and vegetables, you know, and it's all fair and well. They start, you know, going to buy at the fresh produce markets, but they find that the demand really outweighs the supply. And so I've had some people who have processing companies approach me and say, Mbali, do you know any cabbage farmers, for example? I'm looking for like 5 tons per day, and I really need to service my clients. Or do you know anyone that is a potato farmer? So I think if you are interested in going to the agro processing route, you need to ensure that you have enough farmers in your supply chains who obviously will be able to supply you with the raw product. And because you're not farming primarily, you need to ensure that you have farmers that could supply you from January to January, so that, because your clients are expecting you to supply them 12 months within the year. And so you need to ensure that you have enough farmers within your networks to give you the right quality at a consistent basis to meet the tonnage or the quantity that you're expecting. And you have to also have your logistics part of your business in place. And maybe you need to think of having a warehouse or a storage facility, because what happens when your client says, no, we're closing for the holiday season, and maybe you've gone and bought surplus amount of fresh produce, you know, maybe because you got it at a cheaper price at that specific time, and your client says, no, I don't need a lot today, maybe bring 5 tons, whereas maybe you're supplying 10 tons. So what happens when there's excess produce? You need to have a storage facility in place where you can obviously ensure that the food still remains perishable, good cold chain facilities, etc. So even if you're in agro processing or whatever function in the value chain you're operating on, definitely have a plan in place. Make sure that your network of supply is quite strong, and to ensure that your business stays afloat. And so, yeah, I think for any farmers that are listening, or any individuals that want to pursue farming and have specific questions that you want to know specifically on the planning phase of the business, please ask any questions during this live or post this live. But I think just to sum it off, I basically broke down a farming business plan. And so I think it's important to just have a business plan, not only for banks or any talks that you might have with investors in the future, but this business plan is really for you as an entrepreneur to ensure that you are in control of your farming operations. At every stage or cycle in your farm, you are well prepared for that, to ensure that your business stays afloat and it is sustainable. Where workforce or employees are concerned, ensure that you have a good team in place. If you feel that there's certain training that you need to provide to your team, please do so that they are at any given point in time adequate to perform a certain task, or skillful or experienced to obviously meet your expectations. So thank you so much for joining me today. Again, I think feel free to comment. This live would be on YouTube on the private property channel post once we're done. So if there's anything that you want me to maybe go into more detail, please feel free to ask questions, and I will make sure that I answer accordingly. But thank you so much for joining me, and yeah, I will catch you next week, Tuesday. I think it will be the last episode for the year. And I think between now and then, I wish you a Merry Christmas for anybody that believes in Christmas. Other than that, if you are just holidaying and just relaxing, definitely take this time off to recharge, reconnect, and I will catch you next week, Tuesday. Goodbye, everybody.